it would be Saturday, yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Everyone's working for the weekend.
First of all, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, member of the House Judiciary Committee, just left the room where the Oversight and Judiciary Committee are questioning Director Comey. Before I start, let me acknowledge Pearl Harbor Day and to thank the men and women of the United States military, and certainly in that tragic day to acknowledge the heroes who are fallen. We honor them for their sacrifice on behalf of the democracy of this nation and the rule of law. I hope in the 116th Congress that the committees of oversight will focus on the rule of law and that their work will not be frivolous. It will be to restore the strength of law enforcement, the protocol and practices that are appropriate with the Department of Justice, and to be able to clean up corruption in this nation. This was, again, a frivolous attempt by Republicans to drag old investigations into the limelight. In the words of Director Comey, he is sitting in the darkness, for as you well know, he asked for this to be a public hearing, which we believe it should. And so in 24 hours, the full transcript should be released to the press, which we demand, of course, as he did, and he will be able to speak. But what I have ascertained in my questioning is that there is no doubt that there was nothing of substance to former Secretary Clinton's email investigation. And as much as Republicans continue to ask repeated questions over and over again, the director is confident and comfortable with the original decision. We persisted in a line of questioning that I think has disturbed all of us without any casting of disrespect to the director, is a timeline of announcements prior to the 2016 election. It is clear that this was an election of the leader of the free world. For this to be the election of the leader of the free world, I think much, if you will, caution should have been taken. And from my questioning, I have ascertained that upon reflection, a better approach could have been taken. Consultation with the Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General, a holding of the announcement until there was an actual determination that we were not seeing redundant emails. I only say that to say is that all of us who are in an investigatory mode have to be particularly astute and clear that when we move or present, that we present it in a manner that has the least amount of negative impact to the rule of law or to the rights of the individuals involved. In questioning about the IG report, again, I emphasize that I think it would have been important, or when I say emphasize, the report emphasizes that there was no evidence that the FBI delayed in its investigation of the laptop that was found in the fall of 2016, that they didn't dilly-dally around, but that there was a better approach to announcing that laptop, announcing it in the window that it was announced, and as well as to whether or not it had to be announced at that time, even though the director felt a burden that he would be accused of concealing. I think the other point is a letter to Congress that had 16 names on it was clearly an announcement of a national proportion. It was going to be broadcast, and that's what happened. There were those on that letter that had an element to undermine the election, and they just were given a gift to do so. Finally, I would make the point on the question of obstruction of justice. It has now been proven, as relates to Director Flynn, that there was certainly the right concern by the FBI in its initial investigations prior to the Mueller investigations, and that the president, in his very conspicuous questioning to lay off of Director Flynn, certainly may have been on the brink or in actuality obstructing justice. The president's comments as interviewed by a national news host said it was a Russia thing. And so as we gleaned in the reporting or the questioning of Director Comey, I think what I would say is that he was cautious to not attribute those as final words, because as everyone knows, the president has now come forward with a number of other additions and addendum to say why Director Comey was fired. But I think it is clear that his first words, which we put on the record, it was a Russia thing. His first impression, it was a Russia thing, speaks to the obstruction of justice issue in the firing of Director Comey. This is obviously now in the hands of the Mueller investigation, but I don't think we have gleaned any more rocking substance other than throughout the 2-year period that we have been engaged in any interaction between the DOJ, Mr. Comey's firing, the subsequent writing of a memo of what the firing was about by the Deputy Attorney General, and then the extensive Mueller investigation, that we have a crack in the system of the Constitution and the rule of law, and we have to urgently go toward the next Congress to do the investigation in a thoughtful manner. Right now, I don't believe we've gleaned any new information that can move this committee forward under the present leadership that we have right now.
Congressman, Director Comey in the past has stopped short of saying that he believes that there's been obstruction of justice. Did he go any further in his comments today about whether the president obstructed justice?
I think he stayed consistent in his perspective, and he based it upon the fact that the president has walked back his comments about the Russia thing. My question was that in his expertise as a law enforcement officer, isn't it typical for a witness to walk back? His astute answer to that, some witnesses. So I would just say that he has stayed consistent in that. We were concerned that this obstruction of justice had national security ramifications. I still believe it does because it was broadcast internationally that a president of the United States was engaged in saying things that might be taken by adversaries and allies, that we were playing with the rule of law, and that actions with foreign adversaries were actually impacting on the election. But he did not see to the point that it was, at least as I heard, a national security impact based upon the facts need to be brought out by the Mueller report. And he's absolutely right, and we're all going to wait on that. But I would say that if you were in, these are my words, if you were in a meeting with the Russian ambassador and subsequently saying it's been taken care of or will be taken care of, it is not only to me a rule of law violation, but it is frightening. But in any event, he stayed consistent with his perspectives on the obstruction of justice issue.
Can you expand on Director Comey's comments as it relates specifically to this question of whether William Barr should have to recuse himself from overseeing the Mueller probe if he becomes Attorney General?
Well, I think he was cautious in those remarks, and I think that what transpired was a respect for the nominee.
Now, you're also criticizing how Republicans are handling this type of oversight. Is Director Comey an important witness for when Democrats are in the majority next year as it relates to the oversight you intend to conduct of the president and these questions around obstruction of justice?
I can only say that we have a responsibility in this Congress to do what the American people have asked us to do, protect their health care, build on the infrastructure and education. When it comes to oversight, we're going to be thoughtful, and we will certainly solicit witnesses that will help us restore the integrity in the government and to reinforce democracy.
Congressman, when it's all said and done today and this transcript comes out, are we going to learn anything substantively new, or are we going to look back at this as a purely political exercise?
Well, the media is always an astute architect of review, and I would imagine that you might see some interesting pearls of wisdom. But remember, this was about Secretary Clinton's emails, and there is no walking back that there was no basis of prosecuting the former Secretary of State as it relates, no criminal prosecution as it relates to the email saga. That's what we were allegedly gathered here for. The issue of obstruction of justice, there may be a number of nuances that you will see, and maybe the next leg will generate something. But I can say that Director Comey was consistent and steadfast in his original decision. I think the issues around how it was done can always be reviewed or assessed.
When did Democrats use their time to focus on? Did they also probe the Hillary emails matter, or was it largely about obstruction?
We were well versed with a number of members, and we covered the gamut. We covered a wide range of issues, and the ones that you just mentioned, we covered that. Again, this is we realize that this is a very serious historical journey that we're taking. If you go talk to an American right now, their eyes and their minds, their hearts are on many different things. But we govern here on the basis of today, but also the historical reach that is going to occur. And so when we begin to look back on this period, I wanted to be clear, Democrats wanted to be clear that we were thorough in our questioning, but that we got nothing from it. And that there is no reason to jump up on the Secretary's emails. That is a finished case.
He said he labored over the decision to reopen the investigation in 2016. Is that what?
He felt compelled. I think you've seen the Inspector General. His emphasis was he did not want anyone to suggest he had concealed a major element that might impact anyone's presidency. And I believe him to be truthful in that representation. I think the issue was who else should have been at the table.
Is your opinion about how the FBI behaved before the 2016 election changed based off of this area?
No, I think best practices upon reflection, that'll be a responsibility of the House Judiciary and the Senate Judiciary Committee. We don't tell the DOJ how to act, but let us follow protocol. And protocol has traditionally been law enforcement presents a case and prosecutors determine the case. And in this instance, prosecutors are Attorney General, and I think that's who should have been making the comments. Again, that's my opinion.
One thing we hear often from Democrats is why was it that in the case of one candidate that an ongoing investigation was made public before the election, and yet an investigation launched into connections between the Trump campaign and the Russians launched before the election was not known until after? Is that something Democrats specifically posed to Director Comey?
We're very concerned about that, and that question did come up, and my recollection is that one was in one context of level of investigation, and one was a little bit more completed or at a final point, and therefore had to respond to the American people. My view of it is that it should have been a dual reporting. That's a view, but that is something that's worth looking at in terms of protocol, rule of law, DOJ practices. Obviously, the DOJ is an independent executive body, but we in the Congress should look at protocols on how best to respond to the need of the American people for information and also to ensure democracy. Let me be very clear. I said it over and over again. This was an election for the leader of the free world. It is looked upon as one of the most important elections that are held in any nation around the world. We owed a great deal of veracity, integrity, but also fairness.
Do you have any comment on the Manafort and Cohen filings that are supposed to come down today from the special counsel's office?
I think that is going to be a crucial document that will probably generate into review in 2019. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Working lady headline.
Director Comey, will you take some questions?